I present to you the mini chocolate cake.
4 layers of an incredibly rich and velvety chocolate cake made entirely by hand and covered with a super simple and fluffy chocolate whipped cream.
This is a part of my mini cake series where I make cakes that are meant for a single serving so that you can have a chance to try out tons of new different flavors or just treat yourself when you don't feel like sharing, or maybe you don't have anyone to share with and you don't have to worry about any leftover cake. To begin making the cake batter, we're going to work on the wet ingredients. I have some hot water, and to it I'm adding some instant espresso powder as well as the cocoa powder. This step not only makes the coffee that we need to introduce that rich depth of flavor into the chocolate cake, it's also blooming the cocoa powder. Now, blooming your cocoa powder is essentially dissolving it in some liquid before introducing it into your batter. It's a really key way to making great chocolate cake because this step is what actually unlocks the flavors of your cocoa powder. And the other reason why I like doing this is so that you can skip sifting the cocoa powder, because no matter how I do it, I always end up inhaling a lot of dry cocoa powder. So by dissolving it in liquid, it's a guarantee that there will be no lumps in the final batter.
Then add the milk and flavorless oil to the chocolate mixture, which should help cool it down a bit, and just mix it until it's combined.
Then for the dry ingredients, I'm gonna mix the all-purpose flour with the cornstarch, baking soda, baking powder, and salt.
And you can go the extra mile and sift all of this if you'd like.
And for the final part of the batter, we have the egg, and you can incorporate this straight into the chocolatey mixture once it's cooled down a little bit so it doesn't scramble the egg. But I like to whip this up ever so slightly by hand, just separately before mixing with the dry and wet ingredients, so that it gives us the opportunity to incorporate just a little extra air into the cake and make it a little bit fluffier.
Then we can add the wet ingredients into the eggs, and while you're mixing this together, you don't have to be super gentle about folding it in. Just keep in mind that you do want to try to preserve some of that air that we created, but you can still whisk like normal. Then in goes the dry ingredients, and again, it's cool to whisk relatively vigorously here. Just don't overmix it. Once you see that there are no dry clumps left and it's a smooth batter, it is ready to be poured into the cake pans.
All of my mini cakes are 4 inches. I think this is the perfect size for a single serving, and I'll link the exact 4-inch cake pans that I'm using in the description for you. But I've gotten a lot of questions about how to approach scaling up these cakes. If you're not trying to scale up the cake in terms of quantity, say make it 2 or 3 portions instead of just 1, you can just bake the same cake batter but in whatever larger cake pan you have. And the only factor you'll have to change is to either reduce or increase the bake time. And it's really tough for me to give you an exact reference on how long you should bake your cake for,
because how you adjust your bake time depends not only on the size of the cake pan you're using, but also on how many cake pans you're dividing the batter between. For example, if you were to use this recipe and bake it into 2 6-inch layers, then you're going to need to reduce the time since the batter is more spread out. If you bake it into 1 6-inch layer, then you're going to increase the time since the thickness of the batter has increased. But then if you bake 1 8-inch layer, the bake time could potentially be around the same because the thickness of the batter might not be as different compared to when it was in 2 4-inch cake pans.
So you'll have to trust your own judgment. And for those of you who want to make a bigger cake in terms of portion, you just have to double or triple the recipe I've provided you and adjust the bake time based on whether the thickness of your batter in the final cake pan has increased or decreased. In general, I would say to just play it safe, so reduce the bake time by maybe 5 to 10 minutes to start with, and just keep testing it with a toothpick until you see that it's fully done. I hope that helps for people who want to scale up the recipe. Let me know if you have any more questions.
I line my baking pans with parchment paper, but you can also grease them. And to ensure that I put the same amount of batter in both cake pans, I put them on a scale so that I can see how much batter is in each one. This way you'll get really even layers once the cakes are baked. Tap the cake tins on the counter a couple times to pop any big air bubbles, and then I'm attaching my baking strips, which are optional, but they just help reduce the formation of a dome on the cakes so that they come out flatter. This way you won't have to trim off as much. Then into the oven they go at 170 degrees Celsius, which is roughly 340 degrees Fahrenheit, for about 25 minutes. Make sure you test them with a toothpick to ensure that they're fully cooked. Once you take them out of the oven, I like to cool them in the pan for just a little bit before running a butter knife around the sides and releasing the cakes for them to cool completely.
This cake shouldn't come out to have a very aggressive dome if you use the cake strips, so I only need to cut off a very thin layer on top, and I'm gonna cut each cake in half to give myself 4 layers in the end. For the frosting, this is a very standard chocolate whipped cream. And to introduce the cocoa powder into any sort of frosting, I find that one of the easiest ways to avoid clumping is by mixing it with the white granulated sugar first, because then the granules can kind of break up the cocoa powder and make it more evenly distributed and less likely to clump up, because sometimes even if you sift the cocoa powder straight into the cream, it still kind of forms little lumps.
Rusty red on her shoulder, I was cleaning her shoe when it clicked on the trot over in the bright morning dew. We brushed and we braided dandelions and chewed. It was a mutual arrangement we both saw into. Can she walk in the fire? Can she run in the rain? Can she make it up the mountainside? Can she make it down again? I have often wondered if she'll go and jump the fence. Will she keep on moving onward or stay in what could have been? Broke my arm in December, we were running for the thrill. You turned in the canyon to the snowbank where I fell. Even still I remember knowing she could feel it too. Was a mutual arrangement, we both knew what to do. She had a star on her forehead that was easy to find. When I let down her bridle, saw into her hazel eyes. We had a deep understanding, never had to use a bit. Was a mutual arrangement and an honest respect. Can she walk in the fire? Can she run in the rain? Can she make it up the mountainside? Can she make it down again? I have often wondered if she'll go and jump the fence. Will she keep on moving onward or stay in what could have been? Will she keep on